First guest today is the #1 New York Times and USA Today best-selling author of A Dog's Purpose, A Dog's Way Home, and A Dog's Journey, all of which are now major motion pictures, in addition to several other works. So please help me welcome W. Bruce Cameron. And our next guest is the author of The Story Collector and The Story Seeker, the award-winning A Dog Like Daisy, in addition to many other best-selling stories. Please help me welcome to the floor, Kristin O'Donnell Tubb.
Get the mic out. Oh, these are good levels.
You're live.
You're live. We're hot.
No one has ever said that about me.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone. As Bruce said earlier, welcome to the coveted 10:30 a.m. spot of discussing literature, but we're really, really glad you're here. And we both write dog books. So I think that's, I was super excited when the Kentucky Book Festival reached out to me and said, would you be interested in interviewing Bruce? And I was like, absolutely, I would love to. So all of my questions are on my phone. I promise I'm not just looking at my phone.
She's looking at Facebook.
Yeah. So I'm going to just jump right in and start asking questions. Are you all right with that?
I'm all right.
All right. Okay. So the first question actually comes, I tweeted out, what would you like to ask W. Bruce Cameron? And I had a podcast that was called the Jack Russell Parents Podcast, jumped right on the question. And so this is actually from them. What is your earliest memory of a dog?
On the advice of counsel, I'm not going to answer that question. So my earliest memory, I was 8 years old. I was living in a neighborhood in Kansas City, a suburban neighborhood. My father was a professor of medicine at the University of Kansas. And there were no dogs and there were no backyard fences. If you can picture a time of life when you lived in the suburbs and nobody had a fence, all these houses, no fences. And so I just belonged to a gang of boys who ran up and down the yards. We played Army mostly. We were a little confused as over who we were fighting. So a lot of times we were fighting the English. I don't know. And
it's very revolutionary.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe that was it. So we were not that smart. Sorry. And then one day my dad walks into the backyard with an 8-week-old Labrador puppy. And that became Cammy, my first dog. And my memory from that point on is that the boys were just running around and Cammy is with us. Cammy's one of the boys. And in short order, it seemed like other people got dogs. And so we went from being a neighborhood where there was no dog, then one dog, and then a pack of dogs following a pack of boys around. And honestly, if I could go back to that time of life, I did not have a care in the world. I didn't have a thought in my head. And only the care in the world part changed. The thought in the head is still not there. But I've been told that it may come anytime.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, Cammy. I bet Cammy and that pack of dogs loved that era as well. I mean, just running around free, no fences, playing Army.
They didn't know any different, but they certainly appreciated that that's what we did was play all day long.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. My first dog's name was Romeo, and my mother, who was very literary, picked this name so she could, when she called him, call out, Romeo, Romeo, wherefore art thou, Romeo? And she loved doing it, and all the neighbors just were like, oh, here's Helen again, calling for Romeo. Okay. So let's see. Why write from a dog's perspective? And can you imagine writing from any other animal's perspective?
These are really hard questions.
Right?
Can't you soften me up with something easier than so?
How did you get started writing? Yeah.
Why write from a dog's perspective? It was the right voice for A Dog's Purpose, my first dog book. And then that spawned 2 other books in the series. You've only read A Dog's Purpose, but now you're going to read A Dog's Journey. Yeah. You read A Dog's Promise, the third one. So you've read the first and the third one. So A Dog's Journey is the middle book. It just was the right voice. Yeah. And so then when you write a series of books, you write from the same perspective. It's the same characters. For A Dog's Way Home, which was also made into a movie, and you're going to read that one too. A Dog's Way Home, it was the same thing. It was a story. A Dog's Way Home is a story of Bella who gets separated from her person and then must make her way back to Denver over the Rocky Mountains, a journey that takes her a couple of years. And there's a sequel to that one called A Dog's Courage. And believe it or not, Bella gets separated again, this time not by human hand, but rather by a forest fire in the Rocky Mountains, separates her from her people. And now she must evade fire and dislocated predators. And she becomes the sort of surrogate parent to two cougar cubs. So Bella's struggle to get her way home is the story of A Dog's Courage. And once again, it needs to be told from the perspective of a dog. There was a second part to the question.
Oh, it was, can you imagine telling stories from other animals' perspectives?
I'm working on a book. Thanks for the question. I'm working on a book for people who like cats. The working title was A Cat's Purpose, but then I realized I don't know what the purpose of a cat is.
And in your books, you touch on cats a lot, which I think
Yeah.
is so funny. Like they're just like, why are they here? Why do they exist? I love that.
Yeah, dogs have a different relationship with cats than maybe people do. So if people have relationships with cats, I don't really know. But anyway, I'm finding it to be much more difficult than writing from the perspective of a dog.
Yeah, I've also tried a cat book, and it's the same. Like and my agent described it perfectly. He's like, well, their voice is catty. And I was like, yeah, that's it exactly.
Wow, that's why he gets to be an agent. He's so smart.
I know. Nailed it. Yeah. Oh, wonderful. Well, I look forward to that. I think it'll be wonderful.
Okay, well, I'll send it to you. Maybe you'll write it for me because I'm really struggling.
Yeah. Okay, so you have books in this series, or I don't even know. Do you call it a series? Because it's a series, but the age range is very widely, all the way from chapter books up to best-selling adult novels. So, but your voice you're able to remain consistent. Like you can tell it is you still telling the story, which I think is very difficult to do. So as a writer, how do you navigate those different age ranges?
Wow. Okay. So I thought I was writing in a completely different voice. So thank you for letting me know it's not working. My approach to writing a novel for children, like I write the Lily to the Rescue series, that's for the very youngest of readers once they've graduated beyond picture books. And then after Lily to the Rescue, I've got the Puppy Tales. And the Puppy Tales are for middle readers and like third graders on up, although a lot of adults read the Puppy Tales. But in every case, I set out very deliberately to not write a children's book because it's my feeling is that children know instantly when you're writing down to them. They know instantly if you've taken shortcuts because it's a kid's book and you don't have to try so hard. I feel like children are very sophisticated readers and they need to have plot structure just like adults. They want to have a good story just like adults. They don't want to have stuff happening for no reason just because they're kids and they'll read anything. That's just a really bad idea. So I try to do everything I can to make an adult book. And then my publisher my editor is charged with maybe changing the vocabulary a little bit. If I said the night grew tenebrous, they'll say the night got darker. And I'm like, that was a good change.
Yeah. So do you work with the same editor then for all of these age ranges?
No, actually, I most of my editors quit after one book, but I've got a
publishing.
Yeah, I've got a children's editor and an adult author, and they're separate people.
Yeah. Well, they do an amazing job, and it's a consistent authorial voice for sure. You can definitely tell it's part of this series, and I think that's fascinating. And I'm really happy to hear you say you don't write down to children. I write children's books solely, and that really means a lot to young readers and those of us who do write children's books exclusively.
Well, you write for children, but your books are enjoyable by adults.
Oh, thank you. I hope so. Yes.
Yeah.
I hope so. Okay, so speaking of that kind of topic, so in children's books, you don't shy away from the tough topics like abuse and death. So how do you approach these topics? If is it any different than writing for adults for those
Mm.
kinds of topics? Excuse me.
It is probably it's probably different to write about abusive relationships. I'm thinking very specifically in Molly's story. The young girl CJ has a very difficult relationship with her mother, and that, by the way, a lot of my puppy tales are basically the retelling of my adult books. So Molly is a character from A Dog's Journey, and in A Dog's Journey, it's much darker. It's a much darker journey for the character CJ and her dog. In Molly's story, there are still some dark themes. There's still a very difficult relationship with an adult, but in the end, Molly's story doesn't go nearly as graphic and not nearly as dark, and that's deliberate. I try to navigate those waters, but on the other hand, children are. Um, there's almost no way to write a children's book that doesn't somehow touch on darkness, and I don't know why not. In Foxes in a Fix, which is my latest Lily to the Rescue book, there's a dog who was born without a leg, and there's a old man who lives in the mountains who's potentially suicidal, and these are for little kids, but kids can handle that stuff. I mean, kids watch TV. So
Play video games.
yeah. So that's what I try to make a world that a child will find interesting, even if it's a little scary. I mean, why,
That's real world.
that's real world. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I love that. I really, again, I appreciate that as a writer who focuses solely on children, that you do that and you take the time and you make it very organic, very real world. Okay, so we're about to get really deep. So can you talk a little bit about I feel like A Dog's Purpose has this spiritual kind of underpinning that almost relies on reincarnation. Was that purposeful when you started writing the story, when you started telling the story? Your author's note mentions that this was actually a story that you told before it was encouraged to be written down. So was that purposeful when you were thinking about kind of this idea of a dog being reincarnated and learning more, again, almost like a Groundhog Day, but in different forms, bodies,
Yeah,
lives?
so I have a kind of a complicated answer. The first is, people ask me all the time, do you believe in reincarnation? And I always say I'm open to the concept. It's not my life religion. I'm open to the concept, but I'm not doing 8th grade again. Just not doing it. I'm going to tell you the origin story of A Dog's Purpose. I'll give you the abbreviated thing, but I was driving up the coast of California with a woman I had started dating. This is when I moved to California to work on a TV show called 8 Simple Rules. That was based on one of my books. And she turns to me out of nowhere and says, "I will never have another dog." Because she had one dog and the dog died, and no one told her that when the dog dies, it's like the worst day of your life. And so she's like, I'm not going through that again. And I'm thinking, and then why are we dating? Because I am not going to be with somebody who doesn't want dogs. And so rather than just drop her off at the next gas station, I decided to tell her a story to try to convince her that the love you share with a dog is available to you in another dog if you just open your heart. And the way I decided to tell her was to tell a story about a dog who dies and reincarnates and keeps coming back to life, and every time learns lessons, and at the very end of that dog's life returns to his original boy. And she liked the story so much she married me, and she told me, you need to write that as a book. And so that became A Dog's Purpose. So yes, reincarnation was definitely the theme, the underlying theme. It was like maybe dogs do come back. Maybe what we think of as instinct is actually some sort of deep memory. But I thought I was done with A Dog's Purpose when I put that final period in there, and then everybody kept saying, "And then what happens?"
Yeah.
And I realized, oh, when you have a character who keeps being reborn, it's not the end of the book when the book ends. So I wrote another one, The Dog's Journey, switched it up. I broke the mold. I went for this time the dog keeps returning to the same person, a girl who becomes a woman, and CJ doesn't make very good choices. And she really needs a dog in her life. And if she has a dog, she's much more likely to make better choices. And so Molly and Max and other dogs come back to CJ. At the end of The Dog's Journey, I thought, okay, well, I've done it. This is over. I don't have to think about this. And then I started thinking about, but what if there was a yet another chapter in this dog's life? I mean, we have such an old soul now. What if we sent this old soul back to earth, if you will, from heaven? And what if this old soul is so often we'll look at a new person, a child or a puppy, and say, this is an old soul. So meaning that it's a fresh life. Doesn't seem like a puppy. Puppies who are old souls, they're not immediately housebroken. They're not, they don't immediately play the piano or anything. But what they do is they convey to you that there's something going on inside their eyes that mean, oh, this is not your first trip here. So they may not be aware that that they've been back, is my point. And so that's the point of A Dog's Promise. A dog comes back for a very specific reason. It's the same dog. It's Bailey, Bailey, Bailey from A Dog's Purpose. But Bailey doesn't know that he's Bailey, Bailey, Bailey. He doesn't remember his lives now because he's an old soul, not a reincarnated, I remember everything dog, but an old soul who's got these instincts that have been baked in, if you will, by multiple lives. And, but it's the same thing. It's because then this dog named Cooper, who's a Malamute, doesn't go away when he passes. He comes back again because that's the formula. And it really is important that what Cooper needs to do is so important because there's so many people that are reliant on Cooper now in this third book of the series.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And that has roots, if I remember right from your author's note, that has roots in you were on a run one day and you saw a dog who was so happy to see you. Am I remembering this correctly? And it felt like you had met this dog before. Is that correct?
Yeah, I was on a bike ride in Pine, Colorado, which I think has 1.5 people living there. And I came across a dog behind a fence, and the way the dog interacted with me, the way this dog looked at me, the way she wagged her tail, it was Cammie. It was my dog. It was my very first dog, and we talked and we played, and then the dog just seemed to know me. But I mean, you can't read a lot into that. Dogs do that, right? Except I got on my bike and I thought, what if that was my first dog? And that was a long time ago. That was there was decades before I wrote Dog's Purpose, but it kind of planted the seed.
The seeds, right. I do think writers sow those seeds over many years before it finally gels into an idea, and I think that's beautiful. Yeah. Okay.
I've been interviewed by a lot of journalists, and they are.
Thank you.
I
actually have a journalism background.
She reads the material and she asks really smart questions. I'm very nervous up here. I feel like I'm on 60 Minutes.
Well, there's cameras. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, so I'll lighten up a little bit and ask you about your research process.
Well, my research process, I always say things like, well, I have to smell the air and taste the dirt. I don't actually eat the dirt, but I say that because it makes me sound really authorial.
It's very dog available.
Right. I have to lift my leg on people's hedges, and so I did a lot of research into the what we think we know about dogs, what people think we know about dogs. And it turns out what we think we know about dogs are conclusions we reached by studying wolves. And it turns out that what we think we know about wolves, we concluded by studying wolves in captivity, because it's very difficult to study wolves in the wild. They can see you coming, and they're like, bye. And so we have with drone technology and some other things, we have less evasive ways to study wolves and activity. And guess what? Almost everything we thought we knew about wolves is wrong. The alpha male is a role that gets handed off. It doesn't always accrue to a single male. Around reproductive times, it does seem to gel around a single male. But other than that, sometimes there's a different alpha male. Ditto the female. And that's wolves. So picture what that means for the dog park. And I realized that going to the dog park is the best way to do research on dogs, because I sit there and I watch them interact, and I realize, oh my gosh, we think we assign our hierarchy to dogs. We say, well, that's the alpha dog, and that's the vice president dog, and that's the secretary dog. And we have this whole role in our mind, and it's completely wrong. Dogs they're constantly changing. They're constantly shifting their focus. The most popular dog, and you think, oh, my dog is in love with that dog. And then all of a sudden they don't talk to each other for 3 days. And you're like, what happened? Did they fight? I mean, I just don't think we know at all. But sitting in the dog park gives you a real sense of how things change.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of research. It's my favorite part of the writing process. And I have researched a lot of service dogs. All of my dog books are service dogs. And you're exactly right. Like, everything we think we know about dogs is mostly speculation. And no one has any idea how a diabetic alert dog is able to do what they do. And it's fascinating. They just do it. They just know how to do it. So, speaking of research being my favorite part of the writing process, what is your favorite part? Is it going to the dog park? I mean, that's pretty high up there. It's got to be.
I think afternoon snack time is my favorite part. I love a blank sheet of paper. I love starting the process. I love backing up from that. I love the ideas coming together. I've got my office has one wall that's nothing but whiteboard, and when I'm scrawling things on the whiteboard, after a while it looks like I'm either hunting for a serial killer or I am a serial killer, because that's exactly what it looks like. And so and then I take that and it becomes an outline, and then I outline again, and then I outline again, because my way of doing things is to get that outline perfect. It's a blueprint for me. When I get going, after I've outlined so many times, I know what the last sentence of my book is going to be. I don't have any surprises along the way. Yeah, it's not this serendipitous journey of, these two are talking and look what topic popped up. I had an author tell me she says, I just sit down and I let the characters start talking to each other and see what they say. And I'm like, are you crazy?
That's like my worst nightmare, writing that way. Right.
Yeah, that sounds insane. That's how, but very popular book. So I'm not going to have judgment on that. I'm just going to say that my favorite part is the planning and getting that thing going. And then it becomes, I'm struggling with a book right now I've got called Lacey's Story. In outline, it looked good. I have completed the first draft, and I'm really unhappy with it. So this is my least favorite part.
Okay, that's what I was going to ask next. So the least favorite part is the cleaning up, the revision.
Yeah, it's the least favorite is when I realize it's not working as I envisioned it. So now I have to rebuild it and I always re-outline the book so I can see what I did and see where it went wrong.
So you outline based on what you've put on the paper.
Yeah.
Okay.
I outline throughout the entire process. I keep going back and re-outlining.
Oh, great. Okay.
Because I really need to know. I need to understand.
I'm getting
what
good
have I
tips here,
built?
you guys. I'm like, that's interesting. Hold on, I need to write that down for me.
It really helps me. I especially when I've got a problem, I can usually see it in an outline. I can usually say, "Oh, okay, this like there's a plot
where
point
the problem is. Okay.
that I keep pounding on." I realize, oh no, this is so repetitious. No one cares about this. I've turned what is a really tense part of the book to something that's like, oh yeah, that again.
Okay. Huh. That's interesting. I like that. And does that prevent writer's block, outlining that many times?
I've never had writer's block, but I've got a secret for that. When I feel it building, when I feel like I'm not getting where I need to get on this particular draft, on this particular story, I just start writing. And I will literally write what it is that I'm doing. It's not coming out of me the way I want. I'm sitting here. I would like another cup of coffee. I gained 5 pounds yesterday. I start writing all this stuff down, and pretty soon I'm writing because I established that neural connection.
Yep.
And I should be writing a story about Toby. Toby is a beagle who doesn't like to exercise. I've never been a beagle like that. But Toby's story is different. And then pretty soon I realized, oh, I'm writing the book. I'm looking at the outline and saying, this is what should be happening next. And then pretty soon it is what's happening next.
Yeah. I like that. I don't get writer's block very often either, but I am also an obsessive outliner. I don't go back and outline what I've already put on the page, but I think that would be very helpful. I can see why that would be helpful. So, have you heard the term plotter or pantser? So,
No, it sounds like two
Yes.
of Santa's
Yeah.
reindeer.
that's exactly right. So plotter is someone who researches outlines ahead of time, and pantser is what you're talking about
Seat of the pants.
seat of the
Got it.
pants. Exactly. And yes, so the idea of writing something that's not fully conceptualized ahead of time, for me, it sounds like torture. I can't imagine doing it. Yeah. I mean, scenes come that way, but not the whole story, right?
I agree with that.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Let me go back to my
Instagram.
okay. Yes, I know, right? my Facebook. Let's see. So what can we expect next from you?
Oh, I love that question. So Lacey's story, I think, comes out sometime next year, if I can write the thing. It's due November 15th. That is so not happening.
Yeah, that's
Yeah, I
next
know,
week.
right? So no, but I have a completed novel, Love Clancy, that's coming out in January of 2023. COVID really upset everything, and one of the things it did is that my model, if you will, is my publisher sells to independent bookstores, which then sell to the people. When the independent bookstores were shuttered, we didn't have they couldn't pivot. And not that I blame them. They're a company that's been in business for a long time, but it means that I was sort of left without a viable method of selling books to people.
Right.
And we're only slowly recovering. And so this book, which was supposed to be out by now, is now pushed to next year. No, sorry, it was supposed to be out this coming spring. Now it's pushed all the way around until January 2023. But Love Clancy is basically the diary of a good dog. And Clancy is the most anthropomorphized dog I've ever written about. So he's really his vocabulary is very human-like. His thinking process is very human-like. He's keeping a diary, which my dog doesn't do. But Clancy's got a lot going on. His person is sort of lost in the world, doesn't really have. Is kind of rootless, and then there's this cast of characters, and Clancy falls in love with a dog, but there's a rival, and so there's all these things happening in Clancy's world. I think it's kind of the most charming book that I've ever written. I really
That says a lot, because your books are very charming.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's really intended to be a lighthearted read. There's not much that happens, and I guess I should mention, since you asked, A Dog's Perfect Christmas, which came out during COVID Christmas last year, is being re-released. Kind of. I mean, it's basically we're saying we're I love A Dog's Perfect Christmas. I don't love the title. We were literally 9 hours before we had to say we can't publish because we don't have a working title. The sales wanted it to be
Titles are the hardest.
Yeah, sales wanted it to be A Dog's Blank, and I wanted to have it be something else because it's the story of a family that is in utter crisis at Christmas time. Normal crisis stuff. The mom gets sick, and the mom turns out to be the person who held the entire family together. And once mom is sick and in the hospital, the family has to operate without her. They can't. They're dysfunctional. And then into their lives comes a puppy, and the puppy is either going to destroy her. That's it. That's the final straw. Or maybe the puppy is the glue that brings everybody back together. And you don't know when the puppy shows up what's going to happen. But it's called A Dog's Perfect Christmas. And arguably, this puppy has a perfect Christmas because dogs have a perfect everything.
Oh, I love that. All right, are we wrapping up our time?
Well, I think at this point we want to open up the
Open it
floor
up to
to ask
questions. Yes.
whoever may have questions. So does anyone have questions at this time?
What kind of dog do you have now?
My dog right now is Tucker. He is 24 pounds of suspect DNA. We don't we don't know what is he has he's the size of a terrier. He has terrier trembles, but he's got some fur like a poodle and he barks like a beagle. We don't know. It must have been one heck of a party. That's all I got to say.
What kind of dog is Clancy?
So that's a great question. Clancy is a yellow Labrador, and Clancy's best friend is a dog named Odin, who's a Treen Walker Coonhound. And then there's a Shar-Pei, and then there's I remember Phoebe. I can't remember what Phoebe is. Sorry, not enough coffee. You have a question?
So I did read A Dog's Journey. I remembered when you mentioned CJ.
Okay. So I'm glad we got the record straight because everybody here was really looking at you like, come on, what is wrong? Why didn't you read that one? So thank you for settling that for us. And you're going to read A Dog's Way Home. Yes. Okay.
What is your favorite book that you've written?
That I've written.
Yes, it can be one of the dog stories that is.
It can be. I'm going to switch it up on you, though.
Okay.
I've got a murder mystery series called The Midnight Plan of the Repo Man, and the second in the series is called Repo Madness. It's about
It's a great title.
Thank you. It's about a repo man in northern Michigan, because I used to be a repo man in northern Michigan, and the repo man one day hears a voice in his head. And so he thinks, okay, I've gone crazy. I can hear an actual voice in my head talking to me. And the voice says that the voice says, I'm a real person. I don't know what happened to me. I used to be alive. I think I was murdered, and I think you need to find the killer. And so it is a murder mystery where one of the people that we're helping is the victim, who is trying to help guide we're trying to find, it's more of a why done it than who done it. We kind of figure out right away who did it, but why would they murder this guy, this realtor from northern Michigan? And but it's funny because when I used to write books that never sold. I wrote 9 unpublished books. Basically, that's my adult writing career. And they're terrible. And what I was doing was chasing the market. I thought that what the market wants from me is a thriller. And so I'm going to write to the market. And I wrote a story that was based in Nicaragua, Managua, Nicaragua. I have never been to Managua or any place in Nicaragua, but I had been to Canada. So in my telling, Managua looks like Winnipeg. And it was a terrible book because I was chasing the market. But when I let my voice just run, it turned out to be funny. It turned out I like to write funny people and funny characters and saying funny things. And so my Repo Madness series is set in this quirky little town, Kalkaska, Michigan. And the characters are very, very quirky. And so if you're in the mood for it's a thriller mystery, it's got a great plot, but it's also, you've never read a book like this before. So that's my favorite book.
I think that's true for writers overall, is the minute they try to write something to the market, their heart isn't in it. And that definitely comes through on the page, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, I think, although everybody wants a dog book from me. And if I write, a book about a lizard, or, that's probably not going to be as big of a, so I don't know what the purpose of a lizard is either.
Anyone else have questions?
Your show, 8 Simple Rules. What's the actual basis for that?
What was the basis for 8 Simple Rules? So I was a humor columnist for the Denver Rocky Mountain News many, many years ago, and I had 2 teenage daughters, which is way more than a dad needs. And I realized I felt like I was living in a zombie movie because I would open the door and there would be this creature standing there sort of staring at me, slack mouth. He looked like a zombie, he smelled like a zombie, and I'd say, "You go away. But there'd be like another one coming down, And these boys just started showing up, and so I thought, I need some rules here. I need to establish that the dad is in charge, which of course he's not. But I thought that if I just started saying rules, that everybody would pay attention, but they don't. So I wrote this column, 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter. I thought they were very clear, basic rules. It was a column. This is back in the day before internet, and it was just like dial up. And the next morning, it got picked up by the wire services. And so the next morning, I dialed in, there was the modem shriek, and then I started getting emails dropping. And that was when they would drop, and then another one would drop. And I thought,
Whoosh.
this is taking too long. I went and got coffee. I came back, and they were still coming, and they were still coming. I thought, oh, I've touched a nerve. And ultimately, it forged my career as a writer, that I write about obvious things. I write about dads and daughters don't get along. 8 Simple Rules for Dating My Teenage Daughter. I wrote that women would like to change men, how to remodel a man. People like dogs. Nobody knew that before I discovered this fact, right? So I write. I'm so like Captain Obvious, and but 8 Simple Rules. That was one of those things where it all occurred in the dark. Like I got an email from a guy who was a producer for Disney who had picked up my book in the airport to give to his brother-in-law, but then his flight was delayed, so he sat down and read it, and he thought this will make a great movie. So he sent me an email and said, "Have you ever thought of turning this into a movie?" And I said,
like every day.
That was the plan. I didn't know, I hadn't, but I'm like, yeah, great idea. So then I sold it to Disney, and then they decided that they hired me to write the screenplay because I was the cheapest writer they could find. But then they also developed it as a TV show, and it was a hit. And I moved out to California, and until John died, the plan was to take my movie and do something that's never been done, which is to put a movie in theaters starring a cast of characters that were simultaneously also on television. And everybody thought, nobody's tried this before, and if we don't spend a lot of money on it, it might really do well. And then John died, and then that put the kibosh on that. So and then I moved out to California for 5 years maximum, and that was in 2002. I'm still there.
That's how I ended up in Nashville too.
Is that right?
Yeah. I'll try it for a couple of years. That was 95. It's changed a lot. Anybody else have questions?
Everybody. So I will say my question is, so I'm going to be down here like most of the day. Am I better off just sitting behind my table like I've gone to prom and I'm waiting to be asked to dance? Or am I better being a carnival barker and saying, come on in here. We've got everything. We got to watch a man swallow his tail. I don't know. It's like, should I do that? What's the best way to do it? What do you think? The first one.
Well, as his table mate, I'm going to say number 2, because then I'm going to be like entertained all day.
I'm talking about standing in the vicinity of my books. Yeah. So I'm not going to take your advice. And it's only because I come to these things and I watch how people, they don't want to meet me in the eye because they think I'm going to sell them a book. Oh no, I'm going to sell them a book. No, you're going to have to listen to my pitch. And you're welcome to make a wide berth though. That's fine. The thing about selling, you have to be used to taking the word no, that 9 out of 10 people are going to say no.
I think the second one would be much more entertaining.
Okay.
I agree.
All right. We have a minority opinion here. And sometimes that's, and by the way, you're the youngest person in the room. So if you feel that way, that's the trend. We're trending.
Yes.
That's the thing I've had a problem with before, is that I've gone to those stations where I was like, oh, I was expecting this author, and they're not here.
Yeah.
That's the problem.
Yes.
But if you're easily found, or she's there, it's like, oh, he's just right there.
She has got a bunch of great books, and you need to look at those books too. Don't think that she's there to tell you how to find me. I guess Oh,
Yes. No problem. No offense. No offense taken.
are there any adults anymore? My read of what's happening in the world is that we all become children now. We're all petulant children. Yeah.
Children are more adults than some adults.
Yes.
Okay.
Amen.
Well, can we give one more round of applause for our panelists today?